They laughed, not loudly, but enough. Enough for you to hear it, enough for you to feel it, enough for you to remember it. Maybe it was a comment, maybe it was a look, maybe it was the silence when you shared your plans. The subtle dismissal, the quiet doubt, the unspoken message that you weren't enough, that your goals were unrealistic, your dreams too big. Your vision misaligned with their understanding of who you were, and you stood there, feeling it, absorbing it, not with anger, with awareness. Stay until the end, because this isn't about revenge, it's about evolution. Let's go back to that moment. The moment they underestimated you. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cruel, it wasn't even intentional sometimes. It was casual, almost forgettable for them, but not for you. You mentioned a goal, they smiled. But not the supportive kind. The kind that says, sure, good luck with that. You shared your ambition. They nodded. But their eyes didn't believe you. You spoke about change. They listened, but they didn't take you seriously. And maybe they had reasons. Maybe you hadn't proven anything yet. Maybe your track record didn't match your words. Maybe you looked the same as you always had. So they doubted. Quietly, politely, but unmistakably, and that doubt landed. Not as motivation in that moment, as pain. Because you wanted them to believe, you wanted support. You wanted someone to say, I see it. I see what you're becoming, but they didn't see it because it didn't exist yet. You were still in the talking phase, the dreaming phase, the I'm going to phase, not the doing phase, not the proving phase, not the becoming phase. So they laughed, or smiled, or stayed silent, and you had a choice. Argue, defend, explain, try to convince them that you were serious. Or remember, you chose the second one. You didn't argue. You didn't explain, you didn't try to make them understand, you just remembered, you stored it, not as fuel for revenge, as fuel for discipline. You made a silent decision in that moment, a decision they never heard, a decision that changed everything. You decided that their doubt would become irrelevant. Not by proving them wrong with words, but by making their opinion outdated, by becoming someone so different, so evolved, so undeniable that their old assessment of you would no longer apply. And that decision, made quietly in a moment of embarrassment, started everything. Because pain, when processed correctly, becomes structure. Embarrassment, when channeled properly, becomes fuel. Doubt from others, when absorbed consciously, becomes discipline. You stopped talking about what you were going to do. You started doing it. Not to prove anything to them. To prove something to yourself. That you were capable. That you were serious, that you weren't the person they saw anymore. And that shift, from seeking external validation to building internal evidence, is where growth begins. In isolation, in silence. In the space where nobody is watching and nobody cares. You started waking up earlier, not because it felt good, because it built discipline. You started training, not for aesthetics, for mental toughness. You started reading, studying, learning, not to impress anyone, to expand your capacity. You started working on skills nobody asked about, building things nobody noticed, improving in ways that weren't visible yet. And you kept going, day after day, week after week, month after month, while they forgot what they said, while they moved on with their lives, while they stopped thinking about you entirely. You were thinking about yourself, building yourself, reshaping yourself, and nobody saw it because you weren't announcing it, you weren't posting updates, you weren't sharing progress, you weren't seeking validation, you were just working, in private. In silence. In the kind of isolation that builds real strength. This is where emotional control develops. Most people, when doubted, react. They defend, they argue, they try to prove themselves immediately. You didn't. You learned to respond less, to listen more, to stay calm under judgment, because you realize something most people never do, that their doubt says more about them than it does about you, that their inability to see your potential doesn't limit your potential, it limits their perception. And you're not responsible for their perception, you're responsible for your progress. So you stop needing them to understand, you stop needing them to believe, you stop needing their approval to move forward. You developed internal validation, the ability to trust yourself even when nobody else does. And that shift from external to internal changed everything. Because now you weren't dependent on their opinion. You weren't waiting for their permission. You weren't measuring your worth by their reaction. You were measuring your worth by your actions, your consistency, your discipline. And those things were undeniable. Not to them yet, but to you. Let's talk about mental strength, the kind that develops when you stop defending and start building. You became aware of your thoughts, of your reactions, of your patterns. You noticed when ego wanted to prove something, and you chose restraint instead. You noticed when emotion wanted to react, and you chose patience instead. You noticed when insecurity wanted validation, and you chose self-reliance instead. That's consciousness. That's mastery. That's mental strength. Not reacting to everything. Not needing to be right. Not needing to be seen. Just moving with intention, with clarity, with purpose. And over time, that mental discipline showed up physically. In your posture, in your presence, in your energy. You became grounded, not because you were trying to, but because discipline grounds you. You became calm, not because nothing bothered you, but because you learned to process things internally before reacting externally. You became focused, not because distractions disappeared, but because you trained yourself to ignore them. And people started to notice, not the ones who laughed, they weren't paying attention yet, but new people, people who met the current version of you. The version shaped by discipline, the version built in silence. They felt something different, something solid, something real, and they didn't know why, because they didn't see the journey, they just saw the result. But you knew exactly what created it. Years of unseen work, years of choosing discipline over comfort, years of building without applause, and the shift they didn't notice was happening the whole time. Your energy changed, not because you faked it, but because your internal state changed. Your presence deepened, not because you performed it, but because you earned it through consistency. Your standards rose. Not because you announced them, but because you lived them. And all of this happened quietly, without drama, without announcements, without needing them to see it. Because you weren't building for their attention, you were building for your evolution. And evolution doesn't need witnesses, it just needs time and discipline. You didn't prove them wrong, you outgrew them. There's a difference, a massive one. Proving them wrong means you're still operating in their frame, still caring about their opinion, still needing them to acknowledge your growth. Outgrowing them means you moved past their frame entirely. You're no longer measuring yourself by their standards. You're no longer seeking their validation. You've become someone they don't have the reference point to understand anymore. Because while they stayed the same, you changed. Completely. Not just in skill, in mindset, in discipline, in presence. You became someone who doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to defend, doesn't need to prove. You just exist, with certainty, with clarity, with self-respect. And when they see you now, if they see you now, they don't laugh, they don't smile that dismissive smile, they don't doubt quietly, they respect silently, maybe reluctantly, but undeniably. Because you're not the person they remembered, you're not the person they underestimated, you're someone else entirely. Someone built through discipline, someone shaped by silence, someone forged by the decision to stop seeking their approval and start earning your own respect. And that respect Self-respect is the only respect that matters, not because their respect is worthless, but because it's secondary. It's a byproduct of your growth, not the goal. The goal was never to make them believe. The goal was to become undeniable. And you did that. Not loudly, not dramatically, not through confrontation, through consistency, through discipline. Through the quiet, relentless refusal to stay the person they thought you were. This is the never again moment. Not revenge, not pride, not validation. Self-respect. The kind that says I will never again allow someone else's doubt to define my potential. The kind that says I will never again need external permission to pursue my goals. The kind that says I will never again be the person who talks without action. That's the moment, the shift, the transformation, and it's permanent because it wasn't built on emotion, it was built on discipline. Emotion fades, discipline compounds. Emotion reacts, discipline responds. Emotion seeks validation, discipline creates evidence. And you chose discipline every single day when you didn't feel like it, when nobody was watching, when it didn't seem to matter. You chose it anyway, and those choices stacked into habits, into identity, into presence. And now, when you walk into a room, you don't need to announce yourself. Your energy does it. Your presence does it. Your discipline does it. And the people who laughed, they don't laugh anymore. Not because you confronted them, not because you proved them wrong in some dramatic reveal, but because you became someone they can't dismiss, someone they can't overlook, someone they respect even if they don't want to. And that respect wasn't given. It was earned through silence, through work, through the decision to stop caring about their opinion and start caring about your evolution. So they laughed once, and you heard it, and you felt it, and you remembered it, but you didn't let it stop you. You let it start you. Start the process. Start the discipline. Start the transformation. And now, years later, they don't laugh. They watch. Quietly, trying to understand how you changed so completely, but they'll never know. Because they weren't there. They didn't see the mornings, the nights, the discipline, the silence. They just see the result. And they call it luck. Or talent, or timing, self-respect, discipline, presence, power. And now, when they see you, they don't laugh. They respect, silently, reluctantly, but absolutely. And that respect is just the echo of the work you did in silence. The work they never saw. The discipline they never witnessed. The transformation they never believed possible. But you didn't need their belief. You just needed your discipline. And discipline always wins. Eventually. Quietly, completely. So keep building, keep moving, keep evolving. Not to prove anything to them, to honor the decision you made when they laughed. The decision to become undeniable, not through words, through work. And never again will you be someone who can be dismissed, overlooked, underestimated, because you've built something too solid, too grounded, too real. And that foundation, built in silence while they laughed, is now the platform you stand on. Unshaken. Unbothered. Undeniable. Comment never again if you're building yourself quietly.